Alright, welcome to this new experiment here. This is using a Sweet Poppy stencil on top of a printable holographic sticker paper. And we'll use these in conjunction with Stampscapes, of course. But what I'm doing here is I'm applying a water-based pigment ink line known as Brilliance ink by Sukaneko. And the Brilliance ink really adheres and dries on this type of holographic paper with no problem because it's water-based. All right, I laid down some white kind of blocking out of some of that paper because I want to stamp my image in that lower portion. But then to give this leaf shape a little bit of extra body, I'm giving it somewhat of a vignette around the perimeter with this Brilliance black ink, and that'll kind of frame things off. You can use other colors. I just don't happen to have a lot of other colors of Brilliance ink besides some metallics. Okay, so peeling off that piece of painter's tape. That's the leaf right down there, and I'm just showing that I have cut out another stencil from the metal one in a piece of just copy paper so that it's nice and thin, and then I can stamp my image right over the top of that. If I try to do that on the raised, thicker metallic stencil, I won't get very much of an image because of that raised area, so you make another stencil with paper. All right, now one of the really fun things about the utilization, the combination of Brilliance ink and this type of printable vinyl is that you can use colored pencils on top of the Brilliance that you've applied. The colored pencils won't stick to that type of, well, kind of plasticky holographic surface, but when you lay down that white Brilliance ink over the top of it, it adheres to it, and it gives you a little bit of a, kind of a firm surface, white surface with some tooth to it that the colored pencils will adhere to. It's not like using colored pencils on top of like a matte cardstock or something like that. It feels more like a cheap copy paper or something like that, you know, that Brilliance ink. But that's good enough for these colored pencils, a hard media to adhere to. The colored pencils I'm using are Prismacolors, and they happen to be pretty soft. Not all of them work on here. There are some Prismacolors that are a little bit harder, that don't transfer very well, so you'll have to find some colored pencils that are fairly soft if you want to utilize them in this manner. I've heard that some watercolor pencils are softer than colored pencils, and you can use your watercolored pencils just as you would colored pencils, and it might work. Okay, so I'm applying some different warm tones, brown tones in the covered bridge and road, some green tones in the grassy areas, and then I'll apply some of the more kind of deciduous fall color tones in the tree area, in those maples in the background. Applying a little bit of blue down that water area. And one of the things that I was mentioning in the live stream version of this card, the creation of this card, is that when you're coloring different areas and objects, it's a good idea to leave some areas a little bit lighter so that while you're coloring, you're also creating this lighting scheme, giving objects the illusion of light just by the retention of some of the white surface, in this case the Brilliance ink. So if you notice on that rooftop, it's a little bit lighter in some areas. Now right in here, one of the things that I was thinking about doing was giving that kind of the perimeter of this leaf a little bit of extra hue with some colored pencils. So it's black and kind of gray in there, but when you add a little bit of color to it, it gives a little tinge of that color right in those areas like that. I'm not sure if I like that more than just, black and white, or if I like it better, but I thought it was pretty cool. But after I saw that, I thought, maybe we can go with a little bit of a stronger vignette around the side, so I'm adding a little bit more black ink to kind of the tips of this leaf right here. And there you get that, you know, so it just kind of frames things off a little bit stronger now. And I feel that on this holographic cardstock, doing this type of methodology on here, I feel that that leaf looks pretty three-dimensional. I feel like it's kind of looks like it's raised off the page. All right, now I'm collecting my acrylic paint pens here. And I'm starting off with the 3mm one. It's kind of a bold pen here. 3mm is a pretty wide tip. The pens that, you know, we're probably used to using more often in different markers and whatnot are more akin to like a 0.7mm. So these are pretty thick. But I wanted to add a bold texture to the background here because I think it looks good, but it's also because this paper is a fairly loud visual surface, to say the least. And it's always moving around too, so you want to give your imagery somewhat of a bold look, you know, to it. Otherwise it'll just kind of get lost in the background. Unless that's what you're going for, unless you're going for something like contrast. But if we were doing that, I would probably keep the imagery in grayscale. And then, you know, we would have all the color with the surface of the sticker paper instead. But since we're doing it in color, you know, we have all those holographic colors to compete with. It doesn't need to be equal to that holographic look. But you want it to, you know, you want it to hold its own. So kind of these bold marks with the paint pen are really starting to bring out some contrast and different colors within that deciduous tree form as well as the grass. All right, this is, looks like I'm going to go in and use white here. White has the strongest amount of contrast. When I'm working in colored pencils, I start with lighter tints and work darker because they're a little bit more see-through. With the opaque media, it's not 100% opaque with paint pens, but it's a little bit more opaque than, say, something like, you know, colored pencils. With that type of media, I go from dark to light, so I'm finishing off with the white here. But you'll see later on, I do go back and I add in a few more highlights with some lighter tones. Okay, now this one's kind of a gold glitter pen, so I like to give my fall tone leaves kind of a glittery, you know, a shiny shimmer to them. You know, leaves are kind of sparkly when they're colored with, you know, and being illuminated by the light. So, you know, you can have some fun and use some metallics in there. All right, now I'm going in. I just applied my stencil, my paper stencil, and I'm going in and adding some different types of foggy ground cover little effects, and this kind of makes some areas seem a little bit softer as well as illuminated. It's kind of important to kind of oscillate things. Don't use it everywhere, just kind of use it here and there. Kind of have some fog, then have some, you know, an area where it's not applied, and then apply some in another area. Kind of checkerboard your area with that. What I mean is kind of use some, then none, then some, then none. And I think it looks more effective that way because you have everything contrasting against one another. Okay, now after I did this, I felt that I'm missing a little bit of color up there, so I do a little bit of refinement and I add a little bit more paint pen into it. I thought it was missing some orange tones. Oh, okay, right here I end up stamping my word stamp. It's Martin Luther King Day today, so I'm going to stamp out the word peace down here. All right, and I feel that word stamps around this type of perimeter will look really good. All right, so going into it again with some little bit of a brighter, warmer orange right in the background there, just to give it a little bit of kick. And then doing that, I go back in with a lighter tone right on top of it, so it brings out the highlights. And that is it. I'll show you what this looks like with a, you know, different color light shining on it. This is just all fluorescence, and this is a LED bulb. brings out some different colors in the paper. And that is it. Hope you liked the project. Thanks so much for watching.